Hello, students. Welcome to yet another session on post colonial writings. In this session, I'll be dealing with section B and section C. Now, let's see section B drama. Section B drama consists of three plays: Walsoinga's The Road, Girish Karnad's Hayavadana, and Wharton Baker's Our Country is Good. Now, let's see the first play, The Road. Now, before getting into the play, let's have a look at Wolsoinga's biography. He was born in 1934, July 13th, at Abeokuta near Ibadan in western Nigeria. He is a Nigerian playwright and political activist who received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. He wrote several plays in a lighter vein, making fun of pompous, westernized school teachers in some of his plays, like The Lion and the Jewel, which was published in 1963. And he also mocked the clever preachers of upstart prayer churches who grow fat on the credulity of their parishioners in his play, The Trials of Brother Gero, which was published in 1963, and Gero's Metamorphosis, which was published in 1973. Now, when you are looking at his more serious plays, such as The Strong Breed, which was published in 1963, Conky's Harvest, which was published in 1967, The Road, which was published in 1965, From Zia with Love, which was published in 1992, and even the parody King Babu, which was published in 2002, reveal his disregard for African authoritarian leadership and his disillusionment with Nigerian society as a whole. So, the above said plays are serious plays, and before he also wrote some plays which was lighter in tone, and it was making fun of pompous westernized westernized culture, etc., or Western culture. Okay, and then he switched to certain serious plays such as The Strong Breed, Conky's Harvest, The Road, and etc. Now, other notable plays include Madmen and Specialists, which was published in 1971, Death and the King's Horsemen, which was published in 1975, and The Beautification of Area Boy, which was published in 1995. Now, in these and Soinga's other dramas, Western elements are skillfully fused with subject matter and dramatic techniques, which is deeply rooted in Yoruba folklore and religion. So he gave emphasis for Yoruba culture and tradition. Now, when you're looking at his dramatic structure, you could find symbolism, flashback, and ingenious plotting. That is, he give importance for the plotting, ingenious plotting, and that contributed to a rich dramatic structure for most of his plays. Now, his best works exhibit humor and fine poetic style, as well as gift for irony and satire, and for accurately matching the language of his complex characters to their social position and moral quality. So he um, used language according to the complexity of the characters, or the social position of and the moral quality of the character, and accordingly he designed language which matches their personality. And Soinga was the first Black African to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. And he also has written an autobiography, Ake, The Years of Childhood, and that was published in 1981, and followed by the companion pieces, Isara, A Voyage Around Essay, which was published in 1989, and Ibadan, The Penkalim's Years, a memoir, which was 1946 to 1965, and that was published in 1994. Now, in 2006, he published another memoir, You Must Set Forth at Dawn. Now, Soyinka has long been a proponent for Nigerian democracy. His decades of political activism included periods of imprisonment and exile. and he has also founded, headed, or participated in several political groups, including the National Democratic Organization, the National Liberation Council of Nigeria, and Pro National Conference Organization. So these are some of the prominent role he has played politically, and he has founded, headed, or also participated in several political groups like the National Democratic Organization, NLCN, and Pro National, that is Pro NACO. And in 2010, Soyinka founded the Democratic Front for a People's Federation and served as chairman of the party. And in December 2017, he was awarded the Europe Theatre Prize in the Special Prize category, which was awarded to someone who has contributed to the realization of cultural events that promote understanding and the exchange of knowledge between peoples. So this is what he received in 2007. That is, this award is special for him, and he received this award on behalf of his contribution to the realization of cultural events that promote understanding and the exchange of knowledge between people. Now let's look at the play, The Road. Now, as you all know, The Road is one of the remarkable plays written by Vol Soyinka, and this was performed on stage during 1965 in London, and this is written in the phase of 60s. And The Road won the first prize in Commonwealth Art Festival, and it also proved to be a very good effort by Soyinka as a dramatist. And this play explores the socio political situation of Nigerian based Yoruba society. So, the main focus of this play is Nigerian based Yoruba society. Okay, and it also depicts the realistic picture of the society after the independence of Nigeria, and this is considered as a superficially humorous and dramatically intense play. So you can see humorous elements as well as tragic elements or intense elements in this play. I mean, in this play. Now, the setting takes place in a transport depot of Nigerian town in a garage where the salvaged parts of crashed cars are sold. The name of the owner is Professor. He's an unorthodox Christian, and he's engaged in trying to understand the meaning of death. And then what you find is in this the road this play is the product of Nigerian experience during the middle of the 20th century, and it reflects the different roles played by drugs, criminals, corrupt policemen, and unscrupulous politicians. Now, when the play opens, it begins with the conversation between Samson and Salubi. They are the two characters in this play, and both are talking on various issues of the society, like the parody of the police force, the church, and the absurd morality of the wars. Now, you all know that Professor is the protagonist of this play, and he owns a shop called Accident Store. Now, the spelling of this Accident Store is interesting because it is Aksident instead of Accident. Instead of that, it is Accident Store. Now, in this shop, Professor sells a part of wrecked cars to drivers who need them, and with some other people's help, Professor um, are doing this, and they depend on the road for their livelihood. That is how they run this shop. Now, there is another character called Kotunu, and Kotunu is a lorry driver who assists Professor in this business, and Samson is Kotunu's companion, and Tout is distressed with Kotunu's indifference to his profession, and Salubi is a private chauffeur who managed to obtain a driver's uniform, and but he has no driving license. And there is another character, say Tokyo Kid, and is a typical character. And this character is relevant to the universal political scene, and he's also a lorry driver, but he's more interested in leading gang of hooligans. Now, such gangs help politicians in disrupting meetings of the opponent. So, um, he belongs to a notorious gang. And Joe is another typical character. He's a corrupt policeman, fits into sense smoothly. Now, what happens is, Professor himself was a Sunday school teacher, and he's a lay preacher, means he's not so much educated like a common man. He's a lay preacher in a church close to his shop. And what happened is, he lost his position in the church after charges of embezzlement of fund. That is, he made so many mishandling of the fund and drunken behavior. Due to his drunken behavior, he lost his position in the church, and this also made the professor lose his faith in the validity of Christian teaching, and he retained his interest in spiritual matters. And now he is obsessed to find the mysterious truth called the Word. That is very interesting in this play. Okay, the Word, and he believes that we cannot understand the meaning of life unless we understand the meaning of death. So that is his notion, and this notion prompts him to settle close to the road. A number of accidents occur there, and he even manipulates certain accidents. So this is how a professor is leading his livelihood. Now, what happened is, professor and his worshippers conduct a kind of communication different from that being administered in the church. Now, they drink palm wine served by Murano. Now, Murano is taking part in religious feast in honor of Organ, and you know that Organ is god of Yoruba. I mean Yoruba tribes, or I mean Yoruba clan, and he is possessed by God and runs across the road. He is run over by Kotenu, who is driving the lorry and could not apply the brakes on time. Professor being happy to keep Murano with him because he feels that Murano is close to death, and he's keen on doing the ritual dance so that he could get a revelation of the world. At the end, what happens is, say Tokyo Kid makes an attempt to stop the ritual dance. Now, during the fight between both Professor and Say Tokyo Kid stabs knife to Professor, and play comes to an end with the death of Professor. So this is how this play ends, and here Soinga is trying to um, depict the Yoruba culture and Nigerian society with aspects like traditions, nature, songs, and religion. And you know that Organ is the god of destruction and also creativity. And as you see, this play road is structured around the character called Professor and his search for the meaning of a certain word called truth. Now, he also highlighted various tribal traditions in Yoruba society, such as folk tradition demonstrates spiritual possession, etc. Now, and also drinking and offering palm wine is another important tribal custom performed, and that performs a mystic role in the play. In Yoruba society, palm wine serves on the special occasion to celebrate the festival or for the hospitality. Now, in the incidents of the party, when say Tokyo Kid, after drinking a palm wine, stabs a knife into the stomach of the professor, causes his death, and road is used as a symbol to influence the action in the play. Now, this suggests a path that leads to the destination, a kind of link between professor and his victim, and that illustrates pessimistic expression of the tragedy of man's life, and it explores influence of nature over Yoruba people and acts as a vital role in the play. Now, then there is another important concept, that is Egmo mask dance, which is symbolic of change from life to death with the death of Professor. The accident store also has got a new proprietor, that is Kotanu, and he suggests a qualitative change. Now, the road is built around the Yoruba cult of Agamo. Now, the Agamo mask dance um, is a symbolic of change from life to death, like we said in the beginning. And on the whole, we can say that the road is a very complex play. It's a combination of comedy and tragedy. And this play shows the satirical and spiritual attitude of the dramatist. The subject of death presented in the road is found in an early poem, Death in the Dawn. And the road is also dominated by myth and ritual. Organ is the central idea around which the play has been constructed. And also, the Yorubans believe that god of road organ has to be offered sacrifices at regular intervals for the good of the users of the road. So, that sacrificial animal for his celebration is celebrated in a festive mood with a Gungan mask dance and the drums. Okay, so that is how this play works, and you should understand that the road is a genuine work of Soinga's creative imagination with an unusual depends on ritual design. And he also ridicules the religion and its institutions with sharp tool of satire in this play. Okay, and he also uses Yoruba language, especially for the songs. The tonal rhythm of Yoruba are in tune with the drums and dancing, and all three language, music, and action are inseparable from the performance of ritual. So, a dance represents the blending of the religious elements in traditional culture and Christian doctrine. And Soinga comments that death is inescapable through the use of dance, mime, songs, and music. Mask tradition is an important part of Yoruba people during dance. So, through this, Soinga is trying to draw attention to the unfamiliar use of the mask idiom to the significance of death to the main character. And when you observe the characters, you find that Samson and Portunu are recollecting their past life on the road while they compare their indifferences towards the gods through the expression of song. So Soinga again throws a light on the mindset of the drivers, and they perform worship towards God by sacrificing dog, but fails to prevent accidents. Hence, songs and rituals constantly break through the surface of drama and draw attention to this Yoruba dimension. Okay, so now let's see the important characters. Um, the important characters, as you know, is the first important character is the professor, who is the protagonist. He is a combination of rogue and mystic and a person like a pandit. And then you have Samson. He's a captain of thugs called Say Tokyo Kid and a splendidly pliable policeman. He's versatile, mimic, main vehicle for the satirical humor. Then you have Say Tokyo Kid. He is almost hysterical, fast talking, gun pulling Nigerian stage cowboy and timber truck driver. Then you have Kotanu, Kotonu. He's slow moving, sleep craving, ex mammy wagon driver, carries the psychological weight of traumatic road accident. Then you have Salubi. Again, that is also Salubi, Salubi, is a frustrated driver. Then there is another character, particulars Joe, and then the politician who is chief in town is a distinctive character. Then you have Murano. Murano, being dumb, has not uh, uh, any line to speak and is to suggest the mystery by his movement as he limps, and music is as varied as the moods and the theme of this play. Now, like we saw earlier, uh, The various themes discussed in this play are religion, ethics and legality, socio-economic inequality, corruption, then death, psychic themes of tragedy and myth. And I'm not going into detail of these themes because it's already discussed in this play. Now let's see the next play, Hayavadana. And I'm sure you know that Hayavadana is written by Girish Karnad. And Girish Karnad is one of India's foremost modern playwrights and a most renowned media personality. And he was born in 1938 in Maharashtra, and his initial schooling was in Marathi. He did his B.A. at Karnataka University and his M.A. in philosophy, politics, and economics at Magdalen College, Oxford. He was a Rhodes Scholar there, and on return to India, he worked with the Oxford University Press in Chennai for 7 years. He quit the job in 1970 and became a full time writer. And his contribution to modern Indian English drama is highly commendable, and India is recognizing his valuable contributions um, through which is crowned by his literary genius, and that is accepted or recognized through the prestigious Jnanapith Award. And Karnad is a multifaceted playwright, and his works include Ayadi, which was published in 1961, Tuklak in 1964, Hayavadana in 1970, Nagamandala in 1988, Dhale Danda in 1990, and The Fire and the Rain, and so on. Now, let's get into the play, Hayavadana. Now, you know that Hayavadana is a play by Girish Karnad, and it tells the story of three protagonists, Devadatta, Kapila, and their love Padmini. Both friends are in love with the same woman, and they accidentally swap heads or exchange their heads. Now, the meaning of the title is literally horse face, and this is a reference to a man in the story with the face of a horse who is seeking to become human. Now, it's said that Karnad's Hayavadana comes from this period of, the period of independence, and as such contains the religious and ethical Sanskrit elements of the movement, and it also contains westernization in the form of Greek chorus and mass. He was inspired by Thomas Mann's The Transposed Heads, okay, and which in turn was inspired by an 11th century Sanskrit text called Sarita Sagara. And Hayavadana was originally written in Kannada, that is his second language, and he himself translated it into English. And this was first produced in Madras by the Madras Playhouse. Now let's go into the story. I'll give you a very short overview of the story. Now, this play opens with a prayer ritual performed by Hindus to the god Ganesha. And Ganesha has the head of an elephant and the body of a boy. Now, the narrator asks Ganesha to bless the performance that he and the assembled company are about to perform, and then tells the audience that the play is set in Dharmapura. Now, where is the play set in? It is set in Dharmapura. Now, before introducing the central characters who are close friends, Devadatta and Kapila, uh, Ganesha is performed, or a prayer ritual is performed, or the play opens with a prayer ritual performed by Hindus to the god Ganesha. Now, suddenly, a scream comes off from offstage, and an actor runs on screaming that he has just seen a man with the head of a horse and a human voice. Now, the narrator does not believe him, and even when the creature enters, he thinks like a prank that is being played on him, and that the horse head is actually a mask. So, he thinks that the head of the horse is a mask, and he tries to pull it off, but realizes that it is a real head, and that creature is called Hayavadana. Now you should know what is Hayavadana and why this title. Now that creature is called Hayavadana, and he explains that he is the son of a princess and a god in equine form. All he wants is to become a full man. Now the narrator suggests that he goes to the temple of Kali, the Hindu goddess of death, because he is known to grant any wish that anyone has, and Hayavadana does as he suggests. Now, after he leaves, the narrator continues talking to the audience where he left off, explaining that the two young men are both in love with the same girl, that is Padmini. Now, Devadatta and Kapila enters, and Devadatta tells of his love for Padmini. He claims he would sacrifice his hand and arms if he could marry her. And Kapila agrees to find where she lives because he sees that his friend is truly in love with her, and he wanders around the street to find her. He knocks every door, and later he finds her, and he falls head over heel in love at first sight. Now he woos her on behalf of Devadatta, and he privately believes that Padmini is too quick-witted for him, and then Devadatta is too sensitive for a woman like her. So initially they feel that their combination is not going to work, or they are not going to make a good pair. But what happened is Padmini and Devadatta married quickly, and all three continued to be friends. That is, Padmini, Devadatta, and Kapila continued to become friends. Now, suddenly, one day, you come to know that Padmini becomes pregnant with a son, but Devadatta starts to believe that she is a little too affectionate around Kapila. That is a kind of jealousy, or he becomes dubious about Padmini's relationship. And meanwhile, they are planning a trip together. But when he tells Padmini that he is jealous, she offers to cancel the trip because she thought that she should spend more time with her husband. Now, what happens is when Kapila arrives, she changes her mind and decides to take the trip as planned earlier. Now, the trip progresses, and Padmini pays Kapila a lot of attention, and this makes Devadatta more envious. And meanwhile, they pass the temple of Kali, and he remembers his pledge to cut off his head if he were to allow to marry Padmini. Now, when Kabila goes to look for him, he finds his decapitated body, and in his grief, beheaded himself as well. So, it shows that they two are true friends. And now the men are gone for so long, so Padmini was feeling dubious, and she became worried. So she sets off to look for them, and when she finds their bodies, she tries to kill herself as well. Now, at that moment, the goddess of Kali appears to her and tells her that if she agrees to put the men's head back on their bodies herself, they will be brought back to life. Now, hearing this, Padmini becomes excited, and in a hurry, she puts the wrong heads on the wrong bodies by mistake. Now, the men came back to life, but Devadatta's head is on Kapila's body, and Kapila's head is on Devadatta's body. Now, everyone thinks this is quite funny at first, but when they get home, things get complicated. Both men feel that Padmini is his wife. Devadatta says that as the head rules the body, she must be his wife, whereas Kabila argues that as the child she is carrying was fathered by his body, then it is he who is her husband. Now, after deliberation, Padmini elects to remain with Devadatta's head because she gave importance for his thoughts. Now, Kabila is left behind. And later, what happens is the union between Devadatta and Padmini goes from strength to strength as she feels that this is a new, strong, improved version of her husband. She was very happy because she got everything what she needed. She got Devadatta's intellect as well as Kapila's strong body in one body. Now, what happened is Later, after some years, what happened is Devadatta's body started to revert to his original self, how it was used to be, and he and Padmini starts to fight a lot over the best way to raise their son. Now Padmini starts to think once again of Kapila. She takes her son to the forest to show it to him for the first time, and she finds Kapila living there. Now, as Devadatta has lost his physical strength over time, Kapila has regained his physical strength. So this is how this exchange or was working. And he accepts that he is fully Kapila, and Padmini stays in the forest for several nights. When Devadatta finds them together, he is angry, and the men decides to kill each other to end the rivalry once and for all. Now, after they are dead, Padmini throws herself upon the funeral pyre. Now, the tragedy is offset by a man who comes on stage, now telling of a horse walking down the street singing the national anthem. And meanwhile, another actor joins him on stage with a crying child, who is Padmini and Devadatta's son. Now, Hayavadana returns to the stage as well, and it also tells how he asked Kali to make him complete. But what did Kali do? Instead of making him a complete man, she made him a complete horse instead. And Padmini's son like him, and the two sings and laugh together. Now, at that moment, Hayavadana wishes that his voice was not human, and Padmini's son tell him to laugh. So once Padmini's son asks him to laugh, he does so, and the laugh become less like that of a man and more like the whining of a horse. So he could hear the whining of horse, which means he got transformed completely into a horse. Now the play ends with the narrators heralding the mercy of Ganesha, who has granted Hayavadana and Padmini's son what they want. Now they begins to pray. He begins to pray and is joined in this by Padmini, Kapila, and Devadatta, thanking the Lord for the successful performance of their play. Now this is how this play ends. So it is a very interesting play, which gives us an insight into various myths and religious or tones, etc. Now, major characters in the play. There is a Bhagavata, or the narrator, who is a worshipper, and he is also the play's narrator, and he gives the audience an overview of the characters' lives before the start of the play. And he is able to talk to the characters during the play and also reacts to the things that are happening around him when he does not approve of one particular course of action or another. Now he plays the role of an observer rather than a narrator, because he is also surprised and taken aback by much of what happens. Now his symbolic role in the play is to show the audience how unpredictable life can sometimes be. Next is Devadatta. He is one of the play's two main protagonists. He's a fairly sickly looking man, which means he's weak in appearance, but he's smart and as a whip. His father is a Brahmin, and he's both a poet and political observer. Now he has also got a close friend, that is Kapila, and get they get attracted to Padmini, and he feels jealous of the mutual attraction of Kapila and Padmini um, later on in their life. And ironically, he becomes more jealous after he is married to Padmini. And towards the end, what happens is um, they happen to exchange their body and head. So eventually, his later on, his body starts to become what it used to be, and he swiftly returned to his soft, flabby form again, and that leaves him feeling dissatisfied and grumpy. Next is Kabila. Kabila is a muscular dark man. He is the son of an ironsmith, and he is the brawn to Devadatta's brain. And he is the man of courage, and he has great daring and a sense of adventure. is far better friend that Devadatta gives him credit for. And he also befriended Padmini, and later on they kind of develop a relationship, which in make Devadatta envious. And in from Kali's temple, Padmini by chance exchanges the head, and she chooses to remain with Devadatta's head on Kapila's body. And finally, when Kapila is left alone, he goes into forest and withdraws from society, and he gradually regains his former fitness and physique, but he realized that this is a hollow half existence. Then next is Padmini. When you talk about Padmini, she's a beautiful young woman who is the object of desire for both Devadatta and Kapila. She chooses Devadatta because of his intellect or intelligence, and she's very attractive to the physicality of Kapila as well. Now, it is a complete accident when she puts the wrong head on the wrong bodies, but that does seem that Padmini is able to have her choice, or her favorite choice, both Kapila's body and Devadatta's head together. And it was only for fleeting day moments, because when the bodies of the men start to readjust, what happened back to the way they used to be, everything makes her dissatisfied, and she is left alone twice by the men as they kill themselves and leaves her twice. And the second time she kills herself too, having been dissuaded from doing so for the first time, so the first time around by the goddess Kali. Next is Hayavadana. It is the eponymous character. Now, eponymous character means when the character's name is also the title of the work, it is called eponymy. Now, Hayavadana does not appear that much, only appears in the beginning and towards the end. It is not the protagonist also. And he is a man with the head of a horse, or a horse with the body of a man. And he wants desperately to be made complete and desires to be made as a full man. But as the narrator's suggestion, at the narrator's suggestion, he asks Kali to bless him with this. But we find out that although accepts his request, she made him uh, not a complete man. Instead, she made him as a horse rather than man. Then you have Kali, the Hindu goddess of death, appears to most of the characters during the play, and Devadatta sacrifices his head to her. She does receive both men in the end, but only because Padmini has put the wrong head on the wrong bodies. Now she makes Hayavadana full horse, but in doing so demonstrates the perception that the Hindu gods don't really pay attention and can create as much havoc as good. Now, major themes. Now, some of the major themes in this play are hybridity, because hybrids of the characters in this play are the hybrids of different things. Hayavadana is a hybrid of a man and a horse. Even Kapila and Devadatta end up being hybrids of each other. And even in the beginning of the play, being a hybrid is something godly and special, especially the opening prayer is to Ganesha, a god who is a boy with an head of an elephant. Now, he is the Lord and Master of perfection, which is paradoxical given when you look at his appearance. Now, as the play continues, the hybrid characters seem less and less perfect to themselves, and all ultimately feel that they are incomplete because they are not fully one creature or another. Then, another important theme is incompleteness. It is personified by all the characters. Devadatta and Kapila are brain and brawn, respectively, but neither feels truly complete. And this is mirrored by Padmini, and she chooses to take Devadatta as her husband, but she still feels herself longing for the physicality of Kapila. She feels incomplete because she has been abandoned twice by the same two men, which emphasizes her own incompleteness to her. Then again, Devadatta and Kapila also feel a sense of incompleteness when they have each other's body joined into their own heads. Now, the most obvious example of incompleteness is Hayavadana. He wants to be made fully a human, but Kali makes him fully a horse instead. Then you have a conflict between body and mind. The play's minor theme is the way in which the head seems to rule the head, heart seems to rule the head, and the heart wants what it wants, even when the mind is steadfastly wanting something else. Now, Padmini is initially attracted to Devadatta's mind, and she realizes that she is physically attracted to Kapila, and it is this desire that is ultimately much harder for her to overcome. Then you have the role of Bhagavata. It is also crucial in the play because uh, he performs a great variety of function in the beginning, and the very play begins with with his offering to Lord Ganesha. He is the narrative figure of this play and unites the two plots present in it. He cleverly introduces the theme of the play in his invocation itself, and he is the one who introduces the major characters of the story and keeps the audience informed of the major development of the play. And it is he who informs the audience of the marriage of Devadatta and Padmini in Act 1, and Rishi's verdict on the problems of transposed head in Act 2. He also has his own songs, which reveals him as a co-commentator on the action. He appears both in main plot as well as in the subplot. Now, at the end of the play, he leads the benedictory final prayer. In short, it could be said that this narrative figure Bhagavatam is an avatar of the Sutradhara in ancient Sanskrit drama. So that is very important. Then you can look at the Indianness in Karnad's Hayavadana. It is originally written in Kannada, a regional language of India. It's rooted in Indian mythology, and uh, the playwright has used many Indian myths, symbols, techniques, and traditional practices that help in emphasizing the many different themes of the play. And Hayavadana's very beginning consists of an invocation to the elephant headed Ganesha. India, a virtually Hindu dominated country, holds Ganesha as a god to be worshipped at the very outset of starting of a thing. So, thus, Bhagavata, an important character in the play, starts the play with his verse of praise of Lord Ganesha. Then, this practice is essentially Indian, and again, mm, when you're looking at the typical Indian tradition, what you find is that mm, the persons to be married do not negotiate for themselves, instead they send someone else. So that is how Devadatta and Padmini gets married, because it is actually Kapila who uh, goes for the negotiation to make Padmini Devadatta's wife and so on. Now, rather on either side, someone approaches as the guardian of the other concerned. And here in this play, Padmini has a witty and bold conversation with him. Kapila does not tell anything about Devadatta or the reason of his arrival to Padmini, and kept on seeking for her father, mother, brother, or even the servant of the house. Now Padmini's witty speech turns into shyness and blushes, and she runs away from the place. And it's then Kapila revealed the reason for his visit. When he knew about her marriage proposal, um, uh, her wits go away, and the typical Indian female shyness and modesty overtakes her. Now, the tale of Hayavadana's parents' wedding also proved this. Hayavadana's mother was a princess of Karnataka at the time of her marriage. Her father had arranged Swayamvara to find a husband for her. Suitors from different kingdoms like China, Persia, and Africa arrived to try their luck. Hayavadana's mother was then attracted to a white stallion who was actually a cursed Gandharva. Now, this stallion was her choice in the Swayamvara, and hence she was married off to him. Leaving apart the strange choice of the princess, this incident reminds one of the typical Indian royal way of finding a match for the daughters according to their choice. And it also reminds one of the similar weddings of Draupadi and Sita in Mahabharata and Ramayana, respectively. Now, Indian customs of sacrificing at the gods and goddesses altar and the Indian sense of gods and goddesses awakening at the climax point of sacrifices is present in Hayavadana. Now, Devadatta offers his head to goddess Kali, although he promises it to Lord Rudra. He promises his two arms for Mother Kali, but in a frenzy of jealousy against the relationship between Kapila and Padmini, he mistakenly offers his head to goddess Kali. Kapila, seeing his friend dead, chooses to sacrifice himself in the name of friendship and hacks off his own head. Now, Padmini was terrified at the death of these two, and she also helplessly tries to behead herself. Now, it is at that time or at that point of time, goddess Kali's voice stops her, and Kali prevents her from hacking off her head and also gives life to the two dead men. Now, this is typical of many Indian mythological stories that deal with gods and goddesses. Padmini performs sati, an age-old practice by which married Indian women who lose their husband meet death by burning themselves. Now, sati has almost become an extinct practice nowadays, and this episode of Padmini performing sati bears an Indian imprint. Thus, Hayavadana, being an Indian play, has inevitably exhibited much of Indianness in it. So, in that way, Hayavadana is a very important play in Indian literature, and this is a very great, very good contribution or a great contribution made by Girish Karnad. With that, we come to the end of this play. Now let's go through the third play, Our Country is Good, written by Timberlake Wharton Baker, uh, the British writer. Now, Timberlake Wharton Baker was born in 1944, and she is a New York born British writer raised in France. She is a daughter of a writer and a journalist. Wharton Baker's interest in writing and language is no surprise because she is a daughter of a writer and a journalist, and having started her career through lecturing in Greek and French. Now, it's said that Wharton Baker moved to London in the early 1980s, where her career in theatre developed. In 1984, she became the resident writer of the Royal Court, and this relationship culminated in the development of the play Our Country is Good. It's an adaptation of Thomas Keneally's novel The Playmaker. Okay, it's an important point to be noted. Our Country is Good is an adaptation of Thomas Keneally's novel The Playmaker. Okay, now before getting into this drama, you should also make a note on Timberlake Wharton Baker's style of writing, because she is, as I told earlier, she is a British playwright who focused on relations between authority and oppression in her works, and in the light of the concepts of sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, religion, nationality, and language. I'll repeat, she is a writer who focused on relations between authority and oppression in her works, and mainly in the light of the concepts of sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, religion, nationality, and language. And also, you can see that in her work, she creates blurry lines in terms of the aspects of personality, showing that every character cannot be perfectly identified as good or bad. So, we cannot identify in terms of personality, uh, every character as good or bad, and that being good or bad can only provide a limited amount of perception regarding the personal traits of the people, since people are more complicated and sophisticated than they are thought to see. Now, this play, Our Country's Good, okay, is tried to be analyzed in terms of boundaries and associations among the characters in the play, based on the terms of alienation, pressure, internal conflict, suppression, power, hegemony, and sexuality. And also, this could be taught in the concept of post structuralism and post colonialism as well. Now, let's see the details of the play. Now, in Our Country's Good, Burton Baker explores how drama and language can be a refuge from the hopelessness of the grim conditions of supposed rehabilitation facilities, and comments on the ineffectiveness of justice system in reintegrating inmates into society. Now, this is the main idea about this play. That is, it tries to explore how drama and language can be a refuge from the hopelessness of the bad situation of supposed rehabilitation facilities, and comments on the ineffectiveness of justice system of the inmates into society. And Our Country's Good was written in 1988 for a specific company of actors at the Royal Court Theatre in London. And it said that it is based on a true story of convicts rehearsing a play. Now, and also, it said that this play, during the 18th century, the British government used transportation as an alternative punishment to hanging. So convicts were transported to colonies in order to serve their sentence. And it was a solution which boasted the double benefit of removing their undesirable individuals from society, as well as being cost effective. So initially, penal colonies were established in America. However, the War of Independence in 1776 uh, disrupted this practice, and in 1787, the first penal colonies were established in Australia. And it is estimated that around 160,000 people were sent to the Australian penal colonies, and records show that children as young as 9 years old were sent for even minor crimes, with the standard sentence being 7 years. So, this is something which actually happened during the 18th century in these penal colonies. Okay, so such things are being incorporated in this play as well. Now, like I said, this was written in 1988, and it is based on a true story. Okay, and now what you can see is actors and writers engaged in an intensive 2-week workshop researching the theme of the novel, The Playmaker, and it was by Thomas Keneally, upon which the play is based. Now, the final version of the play was presented in conjunction with the recruiting officer, and this was directed by Max Stafford Clark. Okay, and he identified the main themes as the human ability to transcend circumstances, the potential of theatre to change lives, and the power of language. So he felt that the main theme of this drama or this play was that to explore the human ability to change the circumstances or transcend the circumstances, and also he tried to explore the power of theatre to change lives and the power of language. Now, the play follows the true life story of a group of convicts who, having been deported to the colony of Australia, they found themselves required to act in a production of George uh, Farquhar's comedy, The Recruiting Officer, and that was staged in the penal colony of New South Wales in 1789. Now, the actual production was the responsibility of Ralph Clark, an idealistic young lieutenant who believed that drama would be a more salutary lesson than public hanging. So he felt that drama would be a more salutary lesson than public hanging. Now, now, what happened is, now this play, Our Country is Good, which is influenced by the play, The Recruiting Officer, comedy recruiting officer, is a play that now Our Country is Good is a play that begins in the hold of the vessel Sirius. Okay, and a convict ship. It is the name of the convict ship. The name of the convict ship is Sirius. Now, the ship is on its way to Australia, where the British Empire notoriously shipped criminals to get them away from the British Isles. Like I said in the beginning, during the 18th century, this was happening actually in such places. Now, at the start of the play, convicts aboard the Sirius, that is the convict ship, they witness a flogging and speak fearfully about what lies ahead. And in Australia, in Sydney Cove, an Aboriginal Australian comment on the arrival of the First Fleet and the British Empire's presence in Australia. Now, at first, he is curious, but that curiosity soon turns to confusion and fear. And later on, what you find is that the play then focuses on four British men who have just arrived in Sydney, and they were Arthur Phillip, Governor Arthur Phillip, Captain Watkin Tench, Captain David Collins, and Midshipman Harry Brewer. Now they are engaged in a debate about the purpose of imprisonment, and on one side of the debate, the idea is that it is to punish criminals. That is, it is a good idea to punish criminals, and on the other side, people say that it exists to rehabilitate them. Now, they also debate whether or not criminals are born as such or whether crime is a learned behavior, etc. And they tells the others that the convict are entertained by hangings. So the governor orders the midshipman to find a hangman. Now, there are three criminals who have been found guilty of stealing food and they will be hanged. But the governor also wants the convicts to put on a play as less violent entertainment. So, so much debate is happening between these four. Now, in a way, when you look at this play, you find that this is a kind of a play within a play. That is, inside a play, you have another play or another story. Just like A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare and Noise Off by Michael Frayn and many among others. Okay, now Harry has two of the three thieves hanged, but then is filled with guilt. Now, one of the thieves, whose name was Handy Baker, was after an adoration of a woman Harry also pursues. Now, her name was Duckling Smith, and she was also a convict. Now, Harry shares the governor's plan to put on a play with Second Lieutenant Ralph Clark. Now, Ralph decides he will lead the convicts in performing the play. Now, he thinks if he does this, the governor will notice him and perhaps grant him a favor. So, that was their plan. That is, for getting the favor of the governor, he thought that he will help them perform the play. Now, for this play, Ralph selects The Recruiting Officer, a comedy written by George Farquhar. During the Restoration period in England, which took place during the latter half of the 17th century, that is the second half of the 17th century. Now, as Ralph casts convicts in the play, what happens is officers continue to debate criminality, what is criminality and what is punishment, and so on. And some of them oppose the performance of a play while others support it. So, again, this debate was continuing. Now, they vote as to whether or not the play should continue, and a majority vote was in favor of it. So, Ralph is allowed to continue his work and to plan the rehearsals. Now, later on, what happened is Duckling gets a part in the play by complaining about Harry's attentions. So, several of other female characters also started to argue. Now, in that, one of them cannot read, another feels unequal to playing the part she has been given, and the hangman, whose name is James Sketch Freeman, tells Ralph that he is innocent of the charges that landed him in Australia. He doesn't want to be a hangman, but when he was convicted, he was told he had to hang or to be hanged. One thing after another goes wrong, and the first rehearsal is a complete mess that leads to many of the convicts being imprisoned. Now, because of this, what happened is Ralph wants to put a story to the play. Now, he tells Phillips this. What was he telling Phil? He tells Phillips that he should continue the play. And he wants to prove that incarceration can have a rehabilitating effect on convicts and believes the play will serve that purpose. That is, through the play, they were trying to make the convicts guilty and so on, and make them aware of their guilt, I mean, their mistake, etc. But whether it served the purpose or not is another question. Now, meanwhile, what happened is Harry is visited by the ghost of the two men he had hanged. Ralph begins a second rehearsal, during which some of the convicts shows improvement in their role, while Rose humiliates some of others, forcing them to show off their scars from being flogged. Now, Harry and Freeman prepare for the third hanging. A woman named Liz is to be executed for stealing food. So, mainly, they hanged people for stealing food. Now she insists she is innocent of the charge, and Harry is continuously visited by ghosts, and he collapses, seeing that several times. When Ketch returns to the play, what happened is the other convicts refuse to act with him because he is the hangman. Now the rehearsal ends there. So this is the play. Inside this play, our country's got good. Now, as in common with plays within play, the characters also discuss the purpose of the play. Now, each of the officers has his own idea of what a play's purpose should be. Now, Declan swears to love Harry, but when he collapses, he dies. Ralph and a convict Mary rehearses privately, and that leads to their confession of mutual love. And the officers discuss Liz's fate and allows her one more opportunity to speak up and defend herself. Now, Collins insists they have a retrial, but Liz delays with a promise to perform in the play anyway. Now, before the play begins, the convict discuss their plans for afterward. Some wants to try to escape, other plans futures together. The play begins and from the start receives uproarious applause. Means the play was well received. Now, in this way, what you find is that Our Country's Good is a history play based on the real event that took place in the 18th century among the first convicts transported from England to Australian penal colonies. This is a very important point to be noted. Now, there the conditions were extremely bad, but the Wattenbaker's play focuses on the convicts' staging of George Farrag's romantic comedy, The Recruiting Officer. Now, this actually occurred at Sydney Cove on 4th June 1789, the first ever performance of a European play on Australian soil. Now, actually, Burton Baker uses the play within a play technique to explore themes of crime and punishment, the impact of colonial expansion, hierarchies of class and gender, and above all, theatre's potential to transform individuals and societies. At its premiere in 1988 at the Royal Court Theatre, this play was staged alongside The Recruiting Officer, featuring the same cast so that both actors and audience were free to explore the parallels and intersections between the two plays. So, this is how this play gained significance in literature. Now, let's go through the main characters in the play. There are many characters in this play. Captain Arthur Phillip, he is the governor in chief of New South Wales and has come out of retirement to do his job. His aim is to make the prisoners believe that they are not slaves and have a hope for the future. So, throughout the play, he encourages Ralph Clark to continue with the play and is seen as a fair and wise person. Now, when you look at Major Robbie Rose, he fought and lost in the war against America, and he believes that that is the reason why he was sent with the first fleet to Australia. Now, throughout the play, he is a bitter and negative person. Okay, and then you have Captain David Collin. He was sent over to be the judge in the colony. He always converses from a legal standpoint and he justifies all his answers. And when you look at his role, there is a key moment in the play when Collins conduct a vote to determine whether or not the play should go on. And he sides with Ralph Clark in this vote and helps him through the play. Then you have Captain Watkin Tench. Tench is a character that hates all the convicts simply because they are convicts, and he does not believe that the convicts can become member of society again. And he also makes sarcastic comments about them. And he is the complete opposite to Phillips. Okay, that is Captain Arthur Phillips. And then you have Captain Jimmy Campbell. He is said to be a drunk in the entire play, and he's always mumbling and never makes coherent sentences. He constantly follows rules and agrees with everything he says while finding the convicts in the play amusing. Then you have Reverend Johnson. He's not a very prominent character in the play. He was supposed to provide moral guidance to the convicts and officers, and he's very concerned with what the play portrays religiously and focuses more on that than any other matter. Then you have Lieutenant George Johnston. Johnson is not a main character in the play and is known for treating women sinners with compassion. And then you have Lieutenant Will Davis. He is the colony's astronomer and he couldn't care less about the convicts or the officers. He agrees to the play going ahead as long as he doesn't have to watch it. Then you have Second Lieutenant Ralph Clark. He's an officer that is trying desperately to get a promotion. So he takes every responsibility to get the favor of the governor. And he starts off shy and scared of women, but grows into character who falls in love with the convict and becomes more and more assertive. Now, his attitude towards the convict changed gradually, and he was heavily influenced by Phillips, and he ends up treating the convicts far better. Then you have the second Lieutenant William Faddy. He is against the idea of the play because he does not like Ralph Clark. He only appears in one scene. Then you have Midshipman Harry Brewer. He's also an officer, but the lowest ranking one, and he's haunted by the ghost of Handy Baker, a man he hanged and struggled to find his place in the colony. When he got to Australia, he also became involved with convict ducklings, and he becomes a very protective, or I should say, overprotective and jealous, and watches over duckling constantly. And eventually, he dies with duckling crying at his sides. Then you have an Aboriginal Australian who watches the colony from the moment they set foot in Australia. He regards them with curiosity and caution. He ends up catching a common disease they bring with them as he breaks out with red bumps everywhere. Then you have John R. Scott. He's a convict again. He's a hopeless and opposed to optimism, or he's a pessimistic person. And this approach is shown clearly when he discovers that the compass he bought from a sailor is a north arrow drawn on a piece of paper. And he also becomes the most invested in the play, feels that when he acts his role, he feels nothing and forgets about his life as a convict. Then you have Black Caesar. Caesar is originally from Madagascar and wishes to join the play. After the begging for a role, he ends up being worthy servant and beats the drum for Kite. Then Ketch Freeman. Again, Ketch Freeman is also was transported to Australia for killing a sailor who broke the strike, and he claims that he didn't do it, but the blame was placed on him unfairly. And he also becomes the hangman of the colony after being given the choice to hang or be hanged. And he also blames his situation on leaving his guardian angel in Ireland. Then you have Robert Sideway. He was also sent to Australia for pickpocketing. He reflects fondly on his days pickpocketing outside the theatre and tries to impress Ralph with his knowledge. Then you have John Weishammer. He was arrested for stealing snuff, and claims he's innocent and struggle to fit in with Liz Modern, Rose, anti-Semitism, etc. He taught himself how to read and is widely knowledgeable in many areas. He writes an alternative prologue to the play, which contains the title Our Country is Good. But Ralph rejects it as it would upset the officer. And then you have Mary Brenham, um, is a shy girl who was dragged into stealing by the man with the initial AH tattooed on her thigh. She gets hauled to the audition for the play by Dabby Braint and ends up getting accepted after only reading a few lines. Her and Ralph fell in love and imagine a future together, however. And then you have Debbie Bryant. Debbie Bryant is Mary's best friend and constantly speaks about returning to Devon. And on the ship, she sold Mary to a sailor on the ship in exchange for extra food ration for them. Now, both, however, she does care about Mary. Then you have Liz Morden, was also known as the most troublesome convict in the colony. Governor Philip tries to make an example out of her by showing that she can be redeemed, and he does this by putting her in the play. At the end of the first act, she's accused of stealing food, but she does not try to defend herself. Throughout the play, she develops self worth and starts to deny the allegations against her. Then you have Duckling Smith. But Duckling Smith was also a thief and a prostitute and was sentenced to death at 18 years old. She is taken in by Harry Brewer as he is in love with her and allows her to sleep in his quarters. And she also gets treated better than the other convicts as she has been claimed by an officer. Now, then you have Meg Long, nicknamed as Shitty Meg, and she is a procuress of sorts for the other convicts, and her appearance in the play is when she mistakes the audition as a call for women. Now, these are the major characters in this play. Now, let's see the major themes in the play. Now, you know that this is a play within the play, and that's why one of the important themes is theatre as a socializing tool. Throughout the play, we are able to see that the convict becomes more humane and less as the criminals that we find first encountered in the play. That is, all the characters or the convicts in the play are uh, convicted with one or the others crimes. Okay, either it could be stealing food or pickpocketing or whatever it is. So, but they became more humane and less as a criminal where when they started to enact, and that is seen through the characters such as Liz Morden, Shitty Meg, etc. So we see increased socialization through Liz as she is able to maintain friendship with other characters. And in the final scene of the play, she is willing to give her life to protect her friend as she fakes a confession that she has stolen from the stores. Then, power of language. Now, this is a very important theme throughout the play because this language also links to the power of theatre. Power of language can be seen by the effect of the play, the recruiting officer, and a clear example would be of Dabby. When first starting the play, she is a very abrasive character who struggles to maintain relationship, but by the end, she is able to become friends with other convicts and displays a clear bond with them. Then you have rehabilitation versus capital punishment. Now, this theme underlies the play on a whole, especially in a scene where all the officers are discussing their views on the topic. That is, there is a scene where all the officers debate about the um, choice of punishment. Now, characters such as Captain Arthur Phillips have been able to show a more liberal viewpoint, and he shows the intelligent belief in reform, and they have the power to reform the convicts to become better place. And characters such as Major Robbie Rose believe the opposite, as they think the punishment for the convict should be as harsh and severe as possible. So are clear supporters of capital punishment. So both these versions are seen in this play of rehabilitation versus capital punishment. Then you have colonization, and this is the theme which is clearly expressed in the by the Aboriginals, and we are able to see the effect that colonization has on the original settlers, and it allows for internal debate within the audience as well. Now we are also able to see clearly the negative effects towards the end of the play as the Aboriginal becomes diseased and covered in pus and infection, and this shows the physical harm that humans cause on the planet. And when they take over land that was not originally their own, it's also symbolic for showing how humans are destructive of nature, and their actions um, are the main reasons for the destruction of nature, and uh, other generation or the coming generation or the future generation are bearing the brunt of these acts. So altogether, Our Country's Good is a play which shows the effect of colonization and how human beings or I mean aboriginals are treated during the 18th century, and it's based on the real incidents which took place in the 18th century in Australian penal colonies. That's all for now, and now let's see section C. It's fiction. In this section, we have four uh, novels: Things Fall Apart, A House for Mr. Biswas, and The Stone Angel, The Kite Runner, etc. Now, let's see Things Fall Apart. Now, Things Fall Apart is written by Chinua Achebe. He lived from 1930 to 2013, and he was born in Ogidi, eastern Nigeria in 1930. And in 1958, the publication of his first novel takes place, that is Things Fall Apart. And it was an immediate success, and he won the Margaret Long Prize. And then you have another work, No Longer at Ease, was published in 1960, that won him the Nigerian National Trophy. And then he has written Arrow of God, which came out in 1964, and his fourth and last novel, A Man of the People, which appeared in 1966. Now, with the massacre of the Igbos in northern Nigeria in 1966 and the beginning of the Nigerian troubles, he resigned from the Broadcasting Corporation and moved back to eastern Nigeria. Now, during the Civil War, he taught for 2 years in the United States, and the Biafran conflict and his experiences with the war have had a profound effect on Achebe, and he wrote about these effects in several essays like Girls at War 1971, which is a collection of short stories which concern the war. And then he was also trying to show how an experience with such a tragic war can change one's attitude to life. So this is all about his biography. Now let's get into the novel Things Fall Apart. Now you know that Things Fall Apart is a novel which is set in 1890, um, during the early days of colonization in Nigeria. And like we said, it was published in 1958. This is his first novel, and 2 years before Nigeria became independent in 1960. And this novel deals with the theme of colonial encounter. Okay, now Achebe depicts Igbo society in transition from its first contact with the British colonialists to the growing dominance of British rule over the native people. And literary works about this period often painted stereotyped portraits of native Africans as primitives. Now, Achebe's novel, Things Fall Apart, is a response to these colonialist work of literature. That is, Things Fall Apart is a post colonial novel that strives to revise previous stereotypes by portraying both cultures with a neutral eye. So he uses a neutral eye and portrays both the cultures in a neutral way, focusing on the complexity of Igbo tradition. Now, when you look at the setting of this novel, it is pre-colonial Nigeria, in the 1890s. Okay, and this is in third person omniscient narrative way or narrative. Uh, Now, let's see the story. Now, as a young man, Okonkwo becomes one of the greatest wrestlers in the clan. And Okonkwo values strength and aggression, the trait he believes as masculine, and his worst fear is to be thought as a feminine or weak, like his father Onoka. Now, Okonkwo is the protagonist, and he believes that he is the greatest wrestler in the clan, and he valued strength and aggression, and he considered it as the trait of man or masculine. And his worst fear is the fear of becoming a feminine or a weak person, like his father Onoka. Now, Okonkwo's wealth and status within the tribe grow, and he becomes one of the greatest men in the land, with 3 wives and a large stock of yams. He treats his family with a heavy hand, believing that the only emotion worth showing is anger. So he felt that showing anger is the only emotion that is worth showing. So Okonkwo is particularly worried about his eldest son, Woye, Nwoye, in whom he sees some traits of laziness, and that reminds him of his father, Unoka. One day, the clan settles an argument with a neighboring village by demanding the sacrifice of a virgin and a 15-year-old boy named Ikemefuna. Okay, Ikemefuna, who lives with Okonkwo's family for the next 3 years. Okay, that is the neighboring, in order to settle the argument with the neighboring village, they demanded the sacrifice of a virgin and a 15-year-old boy, and the name of the boy was Ikemefuna, Ikemefuna, and he lived with Okonkwo's family for the next 3 years. Then, while living with Okonkwo's family, Ikemefuna becomes very close to Woye, sharing folk tales and encouraging him to enjoy masculine tasks. So, when Okonkwo saw this, he approves the influence of Ikemefuna on Woye and grows fond of him. And Ikemefuna soon starts to call Okonkwo father. Now, after 3 years, what happened is when the oldest man of the tribe, Ezudu, informs Okonkwo that Ikemefuna must be killed, he advises him not to participate in the killing since the boy calls him father. Okonkwo ignores this advice, fearing that others will find him weak or feminine, and he proceeds to strike the killing blow when they take Ikemefuna out to be killed the next day. Now, soon Ezidu passed away, and his funeral celebrations also draws the entire clan. Now, during the burial, what happened is Okonkwo's gun explodes, and that killed Ezidu's 16-year-old son. Now, having killed a fellow clansman, Okonkwo has no choice but to flee the clan with his family. Because the crime is a female or accidental crime, they may return in 7 years. Now, during their time in exile, Okonkwo and his family worked hard to start a new farm in Okonkwo's motherland, Banta, Mbanta. And his mother's kinsmen treat them kindly. But Okonkwo is extremely discouraged by the circumstances. So he plans for the days he can return to his rightful place in Umuofia. While he works in Bande, what happens is uh, the white men begin to appear among neighboring clans, causing stories to spread about their power and destruction. When they finally arrive in Banda, the clan is fascinated but finds their religion ridiculous. Woye, however, is captivated by the hymn he hears on the first day and soon joins the Christians to get away from his father, who is outraged. Now, when Okenko finally returns to Umofia, the white men have changed his clan as well. Mr. Brown, a white missionary who is popular for his patience and understanding approach, has built a school and a hospital, and many clan members are enrolling their children in the school so that they can one day become clerks or teachers. So, what Okenko finds is his village is changing. Umofia is changing completely. It's progressing in one way or the other because of the influence of the white missionary, Mr. Brown. Now, however, soon after Okenko's return, Mr. Brown leaves the country due to health reasons and Reverend Smith replaces him. Now, Reverend Smith is uncompromising, encouraging acts among the converted clan members that provoke the rest of the clan. Now, what Enoch, a fanatical convert, rips the mask off one of the clan's masked Egwegwa during a ceremony. The clan retaliates by burning down the church. Reverend Smith reports this transgression, and the district commissioner tricks the clan's leader into meeting with him before handcuffing them. Now, the clan leaders, including Okanko, suffers insults and beatings before they are released once the village pays the fine. Now, the morning after their release, the clan leader speaks of war before they are interrupted by the arrival of court messengers. Now, full of hate, Okanko confronts the leader, who says that the white man commands the meeting to stop. In a flash, Okanko strikes down the messenger with his machete. Seeing that none of his clansmen support him in his violent action, Okanko walks away and hangs himself. Now, when the district commissioner comes to fetch Okanpo the next day, the clansmen lead him to his hanging body instead, saying that they cannot touch it, since it is an abomination for a man to take his own life. Now, the district commissioner finds this custom interesting, making note of it for his book on Nigeria, which he plans to title The Pacification of the Primitive Tribe of the Lower Niger. Now, this is the title, I will repeat, this is the title of the book that the commissioner was planning to write, The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger. So, in their every words, they considered uh, Nigerians or the clan villagers as lower to them or primitive in their nature. Okay, so that's why this novel deals with the theme of colonial encounter, and the dominant ethnic group in eastern Nigeria is the Igbos, the Yorubas being the major ethnic group in western Nigeria. So always Achebe talks about the Igbo culture. Now, this novel is about the rise and fall of a self-made man called Okenko. In spite of being the son of an unsuccessful father, Unoka, Okenko emerges as an important leader of his community due to his hard work and determination. Now, like I said in the story, the first part of the novel depicts Okenko's rise as a key member of his community despite the handicap of being the son of an unsuccessful and effeminate father. The later part of the novel describes the fall of Okonko due to his inflexibility and flawed understanding of the values of his culture on masculinity, etc. Now, this novel takes its title from W.B. Yeats' poem The Second Coming, which was published in 1919. And the novel Things Fall Apart is about a small village in Nigeria called Umofia. And this novel is divided into three chapters. Now let's see the main characters. Okenko is the main character and an influential clan leader, fears becoming an unsuccessful weak man like his father Onapa. Therefore, hardworking and aggressive in nature, and that trait he brings him traits of him brings him fame and wealth at the beginning of the novel, and the same fear causes Okonkwo to be impatient and brash, leading to his eventual downfall when he can't adjust to the changes occurring in the clan. Then you have Woy, Okonkwo's eldest son, resembles his grandfather Unoko. He is drawn to gentleness and music. Tension between Woye and Okonkwo leads to an eventual split when Woye becomes one of the clan members who leaves the clan to join the Christians. Okay, then you have Ikemefuna, another character, ill-fated boy, the bay sacrificed to Umofia in order to prevent war. Ikemefuna is unaware that his father had a hand in killing one of the daughters of Umofia and doesn't understand why he is taken away from his mother and sister. And he settles into Okonkwo's household for 3 years and comes to consider Okonkwo his true father. And Boyle looks up to Ikemefuna, Ikemefuna. I repeat, Ikemefuna. And the other two becomes inseparable. At the end of the 3 years, the clan decides that the boy must be killed, and Okonkwo deals the killing blow. Then you have Ezudo, Ezudo, oldest man in the village and a great orator, warns Okonkwo not to take part in the killing of Ikemefuna, but Okonkwo pays no heed, and as Ezudo passes away shortly afterwards, Okonkwo accidentally kills one of Ezudo's sons when his gun splinters at Ezudo's burial. Okonkwo and his family are exiled for 7 years. Then you have Ekwefi, Ekwefi, Okonkwo's second wife and the mother of Ezima. Ezima is her only surviving child, and the two shares a close relationship, having lost her first 9 children to death in infancy. Ekwefi, Ekwefi, fears that she'll lose in Ezima too. Then Ezima. Ezima is Okonkwo's eldest daughter and Ekwefi's only child, resembles her mother, who was once the village beauty, understands her father well, and Ezima also shares a close relationship with her mother, who considers Ezima to be a companion as well as a daughter. Then there is Mr. Brown, the first white missionary to travel to Umofia, institutes a policy of respect and compromise between the church and the clansmen. He engages in long religious discussion, and he also uh, with many people in order to understand the Igbo tradition. He builds a school and a hospital in Umofia. Unlike Reverend Smith, who arrives later, Mr. Brown avoids resorting to violence and harsh methods of enforcing church beliefs, attempting to use his understanding of the Igbo faith to convert clansmen. Then you have Reverend James Smith. He replaces Mr. Brown after Mr. Brown departs for health reasons. Unlike Mr. Brown, Reverend Smith is impatient and strict, showing no respect for the indigenous customs or cultures. And he criticizes the way Mr. Brown interacted um, with the people, um, especially in Mofia, before his arrival, and he encourages extreme tactics to provoke change in the clan. And then lastly, you have District Commissioner shows up in Umofia after Okonkwo murders a white man towards the end of the novel. The district commissioner plans to write a book on his experience in Nigeria, and the title he chooses is The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower River. And that reveals his superior attitude towards the Igbo people, whom he treats as objects of study rather than as actual people with their own complex customs and beliefs. Now, let's see the main themes of this novel. The main themes of this novel are tradition versus change, faith versus free will, language, masculinity, religion, betrayal, etc. And also, in other way, we can say that the change and the effect on the society, new ideas, new ideas in new religion, in law, in politics, economics, and social structures have had a great effect on people. Then agriculture based economy also changed uh, to an industrialized society, and violence is also often a result of such change. Now, the tragedy of Okenko is also an expression of that violence. Um, then there is another important theme, colonial encounter. It is between indigenous culture and alien values introduced by colonialism. And other important theme is father-son relationship. Now there are fathers and sons in the novels, and the relationship with them is anything but simple. Unoka is an unsuccessful father, and his son Okenko rejects him. In fact, the one fear that rules Okenko's life is his fear of being considered as a failure like his father. And despite achieving success, his own son Void deserts Okenko. So the father son relationship is complicated by father and son like figures. Then, uh, best example is Ikamfuna, who calls Okenko as father later on. Then also, Ezinma is Okenko's favorite child, and the father often wishes that she was born as a son. Then another important theme is opposition between masculinity and femininity, or male and female principle. Uh, Now, Okenko's life is dominated by two fears. One is the fear of failure and fear of being considered as a woman. Now, he therefore pursues success doggedly and banishes from his life everything that he considers womanly, such as music, stories, display of affection, and so on. So, he's very hard on people, very harsh, very strict. Okay, he never expresses his affection towards his daughter or towards anyone for that matter, and he considers display of emotion, except the emotion of danger, as a sign of weakness. But this nature brings tragedy in his life. Then there is conflict between tradition and modernity. That is also an important theme in this novel. Okenko resists change and strives to preserve what he understands as the traditional values of his community. However, as Oberika, the wise friend of Okenko, often tries to tell him, tradition is not static and change is inevitable. Now, Okenko fights against a chain that is inorganic and imposed, and he perished in that attempt. Besides colonial encounter, the father son relationship, the opposition between masculinity and femininity, and the conflict between tradition and change are some of the important themes in Things Fall Apart. So, with that, we come to the end of this novel. And to conclude, you should understand that this novel, Things Fall Apart, which was published in 1958, is a classical portrayal of colonial encounter. And in this novel, Achibe offers a sympathetic and a critical insider's view of Igbo community, and he seeks to counter the myth of Africa manufactured and perpetuated in colonial discourse. And he uh, treated Africa as a subject rather than an object, and he presents an alternative image of Africa found in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So this is a very important novel, even because of its content and form, and it is a great contribution to African literature as such. So with that, we come to the end of this novel. Now, next is an important novel by V.S. Naipaul, which was published in 1961. Now, Lord Vidyadhar Suraj Prasad, that is the full name of V.S. Naipaul. He lived from 1932 to 2018, and he is a descendant of endangered immigrant workers from India. He was born in Trinidad in 1932. Naipaul is the most celebrated and the most widely read Caribbean prose author who writes in English. He was born to Draupadi and Sri Prasad Naipaul, who was a self-taught journalist and a published creative writer. Naipaul grew in the multicultural milieu of rural Trinidad, and his first novel is The Mystic Nature, 1957, and that was his first published work. And his other works of fiction include The Suffrage of Elvira, Miguel Street in 1959, A House for Mr. Bishwas in 1961, Mr. Stone and the Knight's Companion 1963, The Mimic Men in 1967, A Flag on the Island 1967, In a Free State in 1971, Gorillas in 1975, A Bend in the River in 1979, The Enigma of Arrival in 1987, Away in the World in 1994, and Half a Life in 2001, and Magic Seeds in 2004. For In a Free State, Naipaul won the much acclaimed Booker Prize. He is also a prolific author of non-fiction. He has emerged as a powerful political and cultural critic. He quoted several serious controversies and is known for his strong and often objectionable remark on various subjects, including India and Islam. And his prominent works of non-fiction include The Middle Passage, 1962, An Area of Darkness, 1964, India, A Wounded Civilization, published in 1977, Among the Believers, An Islamic Journey in 1981, A Turn in the South, 1989, India, A Million Mutinies, now 1990. Now, Beyond Belief, Islamic Excursions Among the Converted Peoples, 1998, and The Mask of Africa, 2010. Now, this is all about the, biography of V.S. Naipaul. Now, let's get into the story. So, I'll just give you a very short overview of the story, and then we'll get into the characters. Now, this novel was listed among the 100 best novels written in English language in the 20th century, and it is one of the most significant novels to have been written by a Caribbean author. And this novel describes the travails of the protagonist Mohan Biswas, and he seeks to own a house in Trinidad. And this novel is set in the first half of the 20th century. Even as the novel depicts the desires and insecurities of Mohan, it rather humorously depicts the lives of various members of the gregarious Tulsi household. And this novel also provides a commentary on the relationship between sexes in Indo Trinidadian society, and it also throws light on the complexities of race and of impending exit of the colonial rule in the island. Now, this novel was published in 1961, and this novel won Naipaul immediate international recognition. And this novel is based on his life, especially his father, Sri Prasad Naipaul. Now, Sri Prasad Naipaul was a son who is a son of an endangered Indians, was a self-taught writer, like I said in the beginning. Now, at a very young age, C. Prasad, an emaciated yet ambitious young man, was married into the influential Kapil Dev family. And the novel is set in the first half of 20th century, and all the main characters in the book are Trinidadians of Indian origin. So this work is influenced on by the life of his father, C. Prasad Mehta. Now, this novel portrays the dynamics of Indo-Trinidadian community. It throws light on the superstitions and culture of the emaciated descendants of Indian origin on the island. Now, the description of the lifestyle of the Ajoda and Tulsi family is a record of the detail. Now, when the story begins, what you find is Bipti and Raghu Viswas are second generation descendants, and of indentured laborers of Indian origin. They are residing in Trinidad. Now, this couple produced four children: Pratap, Prasad, Dehudi, and youngest Mohan Biswas. Now, Mohan Biswas is born on a dark night at his maternal grandparents' home with six fingers. So, what happened is the Pandit declared Mohan as inauspicious child, and he will cause his father's death, and wants that the child should be kept away from water. So, among these four children, Mohan Biswas was considered as inauspicious by his family, especially on the advice of the Pandit. Now, he was not sent to school and instead asked to take care of his neighbor's calf. So, when Mohan, for the first time in his life, comes across a lake, he is distracted with the sight of water. The calf meanders away, scared of reporting the loss of the calf. What happened? Mohan silently comes home and hides under the bed. Now, the family is worried and searches for Mohan. As the villagers inform Raghu that Mohan was spotted near the lake, Raghu repeatedly dives into the lake and is drowned. Now, um, with Raghu's death, the family disintegrates. Now, Pratap and Prasad are sent to stay with relatives from their paternal side, while Bipti, Dehudi, and Mohan resides with Tara. Now, Tara is Bipti's sister. She is married to Ajoda, and the couple are childless. Now, the couple is rich and own many commercial enterprises. Mohan is sent to school while Dehudi is assigned domestic chores. Now, unable to stay with Ajodas, Dehudi elopes with Ramachand, a low caste domestic help, and Mohan is pulled out of school and is sent to apprentice with Jairam, a Hindu priest. Now, Mohan is unsuccessful and comes back to stay with the Ajod family. At the Ajod's home, Mohan cultivates a love for book. He reads extensively. Mohan is sent to stay with Bandhat, the younger brother of Ajot, and assist him with the liquor business. Bandit, a lecherous, womanizing spendthrift who is constantly cheating Ajotas and the customers, distressed Mohan. Bandit manhandles Mohan and forces him to leave the shop. So this was what was happening with Mohan. So what happened is Mohan decides to look out for himself, and he seeks out his school friend Alec and begins to paint signboards. An assignment takes him to Tulsi's shop. He sees Shamma at the shop and instinctively writes her a love letter. The letter lands him in trouble as the Tulsis interpret it as a proposal for marriage, and the wedding is quickly arranged and performed at the Tulsi's residence, the Hanuman house. Now, Mohan and Shamma are asked to stay in one of the many rooms in the buildings. In the building, Mrs. Tulasi and her brother-in-law Seth want Mohan to work in their shops. Mohan is not prepared for a married life and finds the environment in the Hanuman house stifling. So he earns independence and constantly finds means to express himself. Now, he was not happy with his marriage, and he was not able to provide any reasonable means to live an independent and content life. So, and also this marriage produces four children. He heartily dislikes the Tulsi household, which he finds regressive. He rebels at every opportunity, tries to assert his independence on every occasion, and wants to break away from the Tulsis. And he names Mr. Tulsi the old queen and the old hen, and Mrs. Tulsi the old queen and the old hen. Um, he calls Seth Big Boss and the Big Boy. He dislikes the high handedness of his brothers in laws, Awad and Shaker, whom he mockingly calls God. Now he is repelled at the sight of Hari, the son in law, who serves as the spiritual leader of the household, Hari's obsession with his illness, his food practice, etc. So, what happened is later what you find is Mohan tries to seek the company of the rustic and illiterate Govind, and Govind also betrays Mohan's trust. And residents at the Hanuman house brand Mohan as a troublemaker. He was often humiliated and also isolated. So, on one occasion, Govind manhandles Mohan. Now, what happened is, after a long time, the Tulsi finally give away and allow Mohan to run a shop on one of their properties. So, for the first time in their marriage, Mohan and Sharma lived independent of the Tulsis. And he becomes a shopkeeper, and his family resides in a house located behind the shop. Now, um, later, Mohan loses the shop and his family is forced to return to the Hanuman house. So he does not live with the Tulsis for long. He rebels and is employed as a driver and an overseer of on the family's plantation estate. And then he is forced to again, after a long time, he ends up in financial constraint. So he was forced to compromise on the quality of raw materials he was selling and except in procuring a weak house. And the frail house is destroyed during storm and Mohan is devastated. So his dream of building a house ends up in so many troubles. Now Mohan is forced to return to the Tulsi household again. He is emotionally estranged from them, moves to live in with his sister in Port of Spain, and begins to seek employment in the city. Again, soon enough, he lands up a job as a journalist with the Sentinel. And as a journalist, Mohan is sensational and is not very efficient at his job. He relocates his family to Port of Spain, begins to enjoy his independence and the new job, aspires to become a writer, buys a typewriter, and types a few sentences. So again, Mrs. Tulsi intervenes and manipulates the situation. Mohan and Shamma reside as tenants at the family house in Port of Spain. Again, his new job wins him friendship and respect of his brother-in-law. Shekhar is married to Dorothy, a Presbyterian of Indian origin. Awad leaves for England to study medicine at Cambridge. Seth and Mrs. Tulsi begin to disagree on most things, and the Tulsi seem to be on the verge of breaking up. Now, Mrs. Tulsi and her children, along with their family, moves away from Arwakas to set up a new house on the plantation at the Short Hills. And much to his irritation and discomfort, Mohan is also forced to relocate to the new house. He achieves professional success, begins to build his own house on the estate. An accident leads to the house being burned down. So, as the tenants at the Tulsi house in Port of Spain evacuate, Mohan begins to reside in Port of Spain. So, to add to the crowd, Awad also returns to from England. Though trained as a doctor, his Marxist view notwithstanding, Awad is as regressive and prejudiced as any other member of the Tulsi household. So Awad also becomes overbearing and fights with Anand. His argument with Mohan lead to a massive argument between Mohan and Mrs. Tulsi. Now, as a company welfare department is disbanded, Mohan goes back to being a journalist with the Sentinel. Now he is now a seasoned journalist. His daughter Shamma and son Anand win scholarship and find their way to him. Mohan is clearly middle-aged and searches for a house of his own with more vigor. He finally finds a house, arranges a loan, Vidya Ajodas and buys it. The house is not as perfect as it looked, and its fault rendered it dysfunctional. And he realizes that the previous owner has cheated him. And he suffers a series of heart attacks and is diagnosed with serious heart ailment. Mohan is in debt and is disappointed that his son and he does not share a warm relationship. However, he finds solace in the fact that Savi has proved to be an intelligent and warm doctor, and Mohan is gradually retired out of Sentinel and the newspaper hires Savi instead. So Mohan steadily reconciles to life, and towards the end of his life, he begins to live a content life. And also, in other way, you can say that he towards the end, while he was leading a content life, he succumbs to a heart attack and he loses his life. So all his dreams come to an end there. Okay, so this is all about um, a house for Mr. Biswas. He struggled a lot throughout his life to make a house of his own, to have an independent family life, to have a possession of his own. But he had to struggle a lot. And once he found a house, he had to face a lot of uh, tragedies in his life. And when he was beginning to enjoy his life, he had to succumb his life to heart attack and die. So, with that, we come to the end of the story. Now, as I said, these are the main characters. Mohan Biswas, ambitious, progressive, diligent son of endangered poor parents, a self taught, self driven man, becomes a respectful official and journalist in Trinidad. And by the end of the novel, what you find is that he takes more responsibility than he can handle, and most of the tasks that he has initiated are either left incomplete or are performed haphazardly. Then you have Shamma, the long suffering wife of Mohan. She's torn between the old order of her family and her husband. She is religious, skeptical, and conservative, and seeks to maintain the status quo. Handles every trouble that Mohan brings in. By the middle of the novel, she stops protesting against Mohan's outlook, but silently seeks to restore order in the family's life. And towards the end, Mohan acknowledges Shama for what she is. And she is an excellent mother, and it's due to her initiative that her children are housed and fed at the Tulsi's household. Then Mrs. Tulsi, matriarch of the human house, has an iron grip over the lives of her children. Mohan derogatorily calls her the old queen and the old hen. Uses both financial and emotional modes. Heavily relies on Seth, but towards the second half of the novel falls out with him, disapproves of any change in her household, conservative Hindu woman. Then she does not educate her daughters and marries them off as young brides to almost illiterate men. And she takes great interest in the education of her sons. Her control over the household diminishes as the novel progresses. Her sons do not abide by her values. Then Seth, termed the Big Bull by Mohan after the death of Pandit Tulsi. Seth emerges as the patriarch of the Tulsi household. Bound to the Tulsi by marriage, Seth is a burly, unethical businessman. After the death of his wife, the Tulsis distance themselves from him and he suffers serious business losses. Okay, then Ovad, favorite of Tulsi household, younger son of Mrs. Tulsi, leaves for England to pursue higher studies and only returns towards the later half of the novel. Then he is unable to accommodate cultural values. Uh, then Ovad is intolerant and bossy. His strong views that Indians from the subcontinent do not adhere to caste dharma, and his handed behavior towards Anand are indicative of the fact that his education in England has not really changed him. And towards the end, what you find is no Owath Like his elder brother, marries a Presbyterian and moves away from the Tulsi household. Then you have Sabi, eldest child of Mohan, grows up in the Tulsi household, despises her father, tries his best to win her over to his side, and gives her toy house. So, though Mohan does not display much interest in her education, Sabi also wins independence scholarship to study in England, and she returns as a strong, independent, capable journalist who loves her father and financially supports him during his last days. Then you have Anand, as a child is very attached to his father Mohan, invest time, energy, money, and hope into Anand's education. He is diligent, sensitive, and studious boy. He also wins a scholarship and goes to England. And the emotional bond between the father and son snaps, and Anand seldom writes back to his father. Then last one is Arjodas, the wealthy and childless Arjodas couple are the extended family of Mohan. They are Mohan's guardians. They have a soft corner for diligent and intelligent young men. Despite their calculative behavior, Arjodas financially and Mohan aid Mohan as and when he asks them. They are meritocratic and are less prone to the influence of family and caste ties. So with this, we come to the end of the main characters. Now, main themes discussed in this novel are idea of house. Mohan's effort towards owning a house is metaphor of his quest to find his space in the modern world. And he seems to be a complex character, and like Mohan, Sri Prasad was quite alienated with his surrounding and craved for a better life. So that made him write this novel, A House for Mr. Biswas. And Mohan's quest at owning a house emerges as a very significant marker. Even the Tulsis laugh at his attempt to own a house and live an independent life. But he carries on with his quest, and he tries to build or buy a house on several occasions. And Mohan yearns for space, dignity, and recognition. He is the only true modern individual in the novel, and he has comprehended that the old colonial order is being replaced by a new chaotic milieu, and is aware that the new will brings him opportunities. Initially, what you find is that most of the members of the Tulsi household mocks Mohan, but gradually copy him and strive for better jobs and education for the children. Then breakdown of conventional societal structure, that is another thing. It depicts the breakdown of societal structure among the Indian community in Trinidad. Since 19th century, people of Indian origin stayed on in the islands as indentured laborers strove hard to keep their identities intact, though severely emaciated and poor. And these laborers wanted to retain the caste hierarchies on the island. They practiced religious and caste rituals, and these religious and cultural practice provided the Indian community with a sense of identity. Now, within a span of a century, these bonds became weak, notwithstanding the periodic visits to India and the regular visits of religious leaders from South Asia to islands. The Hindu community in Trinidad faced a severe identity crisis, and these crises occurred due to several reasons, including the rise of nationalism in the islands, the weakening of the colonial structure, the change in the political economy of the island, and the migration of young people to India. Now, uh, here, Naipaul is trying to point out that these indentured laborers could also work on the plantation because it offered to a large section of population job. And in the 20th century, as plantations gave way to the service industry, an individual had to be clever. Now, the struggle against the colonial rule and demands for self rule brought together the black and the Asian population. With that, we come to the end of the novel. A House for Mr. Biswas. Next is Stone Angel, which is written by Margaret Lawrence, and this novel is published in 1964. Now, Margaret Lawrence lived from 1926 to 1987. She began writing professionally in 1943, and when she got a summer job as a reporter for the town newspaper. And her name is Jean Margaret Wemyss initially, and in 1941 she enrolled herself in the English Honours program at Winnipeg's United College. After graduating, she became a reporter for the Winnipeg Citizen. In 1947, she married Jack Lawrence. In 1949, Margaret Lawrence moved to Somalia with her husband and lived in Africa till 1957. And she wrote a number of short stories on African subject and maintained a great interest in African literature. In 1957, Margaret Lawrence returned to Canada and settled in Vancouver. After separating from her husband in 1962, she moved with her two children to England. She received the Governor General's Award twice, first for A Jest of God, which was published in 1966, and again for The Diviner 1974. Her books of essay Heart of a Stranger was published in 1976, and her memoir Dance on the Earth was published posthumously in 1987. Lawrence had also written The Olden Days Court in 1979, Six Darn Cows 1979, and The Christmas Birthday Story 1980 for children. Now let's get into the story. Um, Before getting into the story, you should know that The Stone Angel was published in 1964 and is set in the fictitious town of Manawaka, Manitoba in the early 1960s. So, this is an important point to be noted. Now, in The Stone Angel, there are two independent plots. In terms of the present time, it is the story of an old woman in her 90s whose physical breakdown has made her dependent, and who realizes that her son and daughter-in-law are planning to send her to an old people's institution. Now, her pride rebels against such an identification with the helpless aged, and one day she escapes from her Vancouver house to spend a couple of days in an abandoned fish cannery. And with this primary plot, which lasts only a few days, set in the 1960s, goes another plot in which the old lady Haggard Shipley recollects her long life in a series of flashbacks. And there is one crucial period of 2 years, in contrast to the other vividly remembered period goes virtually undescribed. And the story goes like this. Um, at 90 years old, the frail but stubborn Hagar Shipley, she was born Hagar Curie in Manawaka, Manitoba in 1886, and reflects on her life. She's thinking about her life. As she has grown old, she has found herself slipping more and more, often into memories as a way of escaping her confining and unhappy present situation. She lives with her son Marvin and his wife Dorissa, or rather, they live with her in a house she purchased many years ago, and constant gastrointestinal discomfort and arthritic stiffness plague Hagar's every waking moment. As Hagar grows paranoid that Doris and Marvin are planning on sending her away to a nursing home, she retreats into the past with increasing frequency. Now, Hagar's mother died bringing her into the world, and since her burial, an expensive stone angel with unseen blank eyes, has guarded over her family's plot in the Manavoka cemetery. Raised by her widower father Jason Curie, a Scottish immigrant from a prominent family of Highlander who struck out on his own, founded that the first general store at Manawaka, alongside two brothers Matt and Dan. Haggard cultivated a small group of friends in town, including Charlotte Taper, Lottie Drissier, Telford Simons, and Henry Pearl. Haggard's brother Dan died as a teenager after a bout of pneumonia. In a very important moment that resonates through her life for years, Hagar refused her brother Matt's request for her to impersonate um, their mother and, and comfort Dan on his deathbed. Hagar's indecision in that moment was repeated throughout her youth until, frustrated by her stagnancy and feeling constricted by the demands of traditional womanhood, she made a decisive choice that would splinter her family forever. Hagar chose to accept a marriage proposal from Brampton Shipley, an older farmer who lived on the outskirts of town, and whose crass causeway two, two grown children from a previous marriage and a dubious finances made him a poor choice in all ways. But one marrying Bram freed Hagar from her strict father's demands and allowed her to strike out on her own for the first time in her life. After stumbling upon a newspaper advertisement for a nursing home called Silver Threads, Hagar's worst fears are confirmed. Doris and Marvin are planning to send her away. Hagar fears leaving behind her home and the possessions she has accumulated throughout her life. Still, as the days go by, Hagar becomes more aware of the strain she's putting on Doris and Marvin, and her frequent falls require their constant attention and often physical efforts, and her stubborn temperament grates on their nerves. Marvin and Doris suggest that Hagar meet with a doctor and get his advice about where to live. After her marriage to Bram, Hagar's brother Matt died, and her friends and town began viewing her differently. She had abandoned the social world of Manawaka for Bram, and her only solace was her deep physical attraction to her new husband. Otherwise, his terrible behavior, unclean ways, and blatant disregard for her feelings made their marriage an unhappy one. Now, Hagar's meeting with her doctor and the subsequent X-ray she endures confirmed to Mahavir and Doris that Hagar would be better off with professional care, though they refused to share the result of the test with her. The attempt to bring her by and panic Hagar is closed up, and contemptuous and insist on being taken home at the earliest possible opportunity. Now, this novel um, keeps something, especially the plot of this novel, keeps something hidden and open to conjecture. Now, in this way, it draws the reader into the heart of the novel by alerting them to the possibility that Hagar may be telling the truth as sees it, but it is not necessary that the whole story is true. Readers need to recognize that her telling is based on her memories, and that memories, like opinions, can be biased. And this novel is, in fact, somewhat like an autobiography. Now, what are the main themes of this novel? One is pride, that is the prevailing theme of the novel. Hagar's greatest pride helps her to cope with the many difficulties she faces throughout her life, and this pride, however, also separates and detaches her from others, resulting in several strained relationships. And Hagar's pride repeatedly imprisoned her within the confines of affections and misdirected emotion. More specifically, her pride caused such things such as unhappy marriage with Branton. And then there is another important point, time. Most important factor in determining the structure of the novel. Asserting temporal dominance occurs a number of times in the novel. Hagar leaving Bram and at the same time leaving her hometown comments on her departure. And it is through her sense of time that Hagar measures the space of Manawaka. The novel consists of alternating passages from a past and a present, both of which exist within Hagar's mind. And she is either remembering or perceiving the world around her with an old woman's suspicious eyes, which gives her observation their special twist and color. And survival is another important theme. In 10 year sentences, Margaret Lawrence has stated, with this, I quote, with the Stone Angel, without my recognizing it at the time, the theme had changed to that of survival, the attempt of the personality to survive with some dignity, toting the load of excess mental baggage that everyone carries until the moment of death. Now, 3 years after Lawrence wrote this essay, Margaret Atwood's Survival appeared in 1972. And though Atwood has made only three brief references to the Stone Angel in her book, Lawrence considers her novel as a story of liberation, frustration, attempts at liberation in a general context. Next important theme is freedom. It is linked to the survival and also linked to the theme of hostility between settlers and hunters that has dominated the entire history of North America. The constant contrast between Bram Shipley and Jason Curie, which appealed to Hagar, is that between the rigidities of the invading mercantilism represented by her father, a strict Presbyterian self-made man, and the vanishing liberties of the frontiers represented by Bram. Now, when you're looking at the significance of this novel, title of this novel, um, the Stone Angel is a symbol. It is an object which has a special role, symbolizes Jason Curie's pride when he sets it up, and it is Dynasty, which in a bitter, ironic twist of fate expires with him. Now, the statue also symbolizes Hagar's blind refusal to recognize her own nature and the consequence of her pride. And finally, the statue symbolizes the way in which Hagar shares the obstinate, arrogant disposition of Jason Curie and even his attitudes to life. Now, pride is the besetting sin of both of them, which makes them often strangely unfeeling. And the idea of those unmoving eyes recur when Hagar's son On is killed, and she says, I quote, the night my son died, I was transformed to stone and never wept at all. So she became emotionless, like a stone, when she came to know about the death of her son. Now, central character of the novel is Margaret Lawrence. She wrote herself, I quote, I wrote about Hagar as one individual and the old woman who certainly came out of my own background. And Hagar Shipley is sustained by her pride, and she is made monstrous by her pride. She is 90 years old when her voice is heard for the first time, and she bitterly describes herself as her unforgiving spirit. And she is by turns agonizingly bitter, snarling and sarcastic or weak, vulnerable and weeping. And her son Marvin and daughter-in-law Doris themselves in their 60s have to bear with her hour by hour and day by day. She is humiliated by hourly and daily by being so vulnerable, and yet she is impeccably unyielding to them in their honest efforts. And she is unhappy for her age, her weakness, and for the failure in her life. Then Hagar's pride is a factor of her background, both ancestral and historical. Her father, Jason Curie, was a relentlessly proud man. The little western Canadian town Manawaka was built by Jason Curie and other Scottish immigrants like him and was made secure by the pride of its builders. Manawaka was also potentially a prison for its people who were ruthlessly restricted by its propriety. In her vision of life, everybody else is a minor figure, and the novel has no real dialogue. The characters never truly converse. They exchange statements that are embodied in the great sprawling continuum of Hagar's murmuring, and their encounters are stylized in recollection. So Hagar's prejudices and resentments stand out for all to see, and readers are on guard all the time for the bias that sooner or later emerges in all her statements. With that, we come to the end of this novel, Stone Angel. So, Stone Angel is a very important novel, and it came at a very crucial stage in the development of Canadian fiction, which was moving forward from its formative stage. And with that, we come to the end of this novel, Stone Angel. Now, let's go through the last novel, The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. Now, before getting into the novel, let's see some details about Khalid Hosseini. He was born in 1965 in Kabul, Afghanistan. And as you see, the setting of this novel, The Kite Runner, is also Kabul. And Hosseini and his family moved to Paris in 1976. Then they immigrated to the United States in 1980 as refugees with political asylum. And Hosseini's parents, a former diplomat and a teacher, settled in San Jose, California, where they subsisted on welfare until his father, working odd jobs, managed to independently support the family. And it said that Hosseini received a biology degree in 1988 from Santa Clara University and a medical degree from the University of California in 1993. Now, as of 2005, he is a practicing physician specializing in internal medicine in Northern California. Now, uh, when you're looking at his contribution to literature, he has published several stories before writing his first novel, The Kite Runner. And as a doctor with an active practice and many patients, Hosseini struggled to find time to expand the story. So he wrote the novel piecemeal in the early morning hours. And then you can also see that in 2004, Hosseini was selected by the Young Adult Library Services Association to receive an Alex Award, an honor given to the authors of the 10 best adult books for teenagers published in the previous year. And also in 2004, he was given the Original Voices Award by the Borders Group, and The Kite Runner was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. And his next novel, entitled Dreaming in Titanic City, is also slated for publication in 2006. And he also wrote another novel, uh, Thousand Splendid Suns, and also And the Mountains Echoed are his other novels, which gave him uh, fame and recognition. Now, let's get into the novel. The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini was published in 2003. And this novel is set in Afghanistan from the late 1972 to 1981, and the start of the Soviet occupation, then in the Afghan community in California from the 1980s to the early 2000s, and finally in contemporary Afghanistan during the Taliban regime. Now, The Kite Runner is the story of strained family relationships between a father and a son, and between two brothers, how they deal with guilt and forgiveness, and how the weather of political and social transformations of Afghanistan from the 1970s to 2001 has affected their life. And The Kite Runner opens in 2001, and now let's see the story. Mm, The Kite Runner follows the narrator Amir and his memories from when he was a boy in Kabul, Afghanistan. Now, the time of the novel is around the fall of the monarchy and ends around 2001 when the Taliban regime collapsed, as I mentioned in the beginning. Now, the story begins in 2001 with the narrator recalling an impactful unnamed event that occurred in 1975. Now, Amir, living with his father, whom he calls Baba, and his two servants, Ali and Hassan. Hassan is Ali's son. Now, the king of Afghanistan is recently overthrown, causing polarization throughout the country as the monarchy falls and no stable government exists any longer. Now, Amir remembers playing with Hassan, who was discriminated against for being to the Hazara ethnic minority, and lives with his father Ali as Amir and Baba's servants. Now, growing up, the two boys used to play a kite game where to win players had to cut the string of another's kite. Now, one of the boys would run after the kites that have been cut after each round. Now, in this case, it was Hassan. Now, Amir's friend Wali, Asif, and Kamal would constantly bully Amir for having friendship or having shared friendship and living with Hassan during these kite games. Now, Amir did defend Hassan and ignored Asif's insult, but one day the kite escapes and Hassan runs after that. After chasing it, Amir witnesses Hassan held by Kamal and Wali being raped by Asif while the kite is on the ground. Now Amir was in shock. He runs away and Hassan returns to the game with the kite and the two act as if nothing has happened. Now, after some time, Amir tries to get Hassan to leave the house and frames him by stealing Baba's money and putting it in Hassan's bed. Now, Hassan admitted to stealing the money, and that winter, Ali and Hassan moved out of the house because they no longer wanted to live in a house where they are um, called as thief. Now the book then time skips to Amir finishing high school as World War the Second is expected to start. Now the Soviets invaded his home, and Baba and Amir migrate to Pakistan. Baba passes due to lung cancer after Amir meets the daughter of one of Baba's friends, Suraya, and marries her. Now, then what happens is Amir gets a call from his old friend stating that the Soviets have left and an insurgent group known as the Taliban has taken over his hometown. So Amir decides to return to Kabul to look for Hassan, and upon finding Hassan and his wife, Farzana, he found out that they had a son named Sohrab. After Amir went home to Pakistan, he received a call from um, Sanubar, Sohrab's grandmother, a year later saying that Hassan and Farzana had been killed and Sohrab would be sent to an orphanage. So Amir wanted to bring Sohrab back to Pakistan with him and thus began searching for him. Now, arriving in Kabul, Amir discovered that Sohrab would be in a soccer stadium during a game. Now, when Amir meets with the official he had set up an appointment with, um, previously asking for Sohrab, the soldier brings Sohrab with Asif. Now, Sohrab is dressed like a woman with makeup and traditional clothing, implying that Sohrab was sexually assaulted. So Asif tells Amir that they have unfinished business, and Asif began to beat Amir with brass knuckle, breaking his ribs. Sohrab interferes by shooting Asif in the eye with his slingshot to save Amir. And in the hospital, Amir asks Sohrab to come to the US with him, and Sohrab seems to agree by remaining silent. Afterwards, what happened is Amir takes Sohrab to the US Embassy where they reject the application as Amir has no solid evidence proving Sohrab's parents to be dead. Now they called Sharif, Suraya's uncle, and Amir goes back to Pakistan with Sohrab to figure out a way to get Sohrab to the US through means of a petition. Now, during this time, Sohrab attempts to commit suicide by slitting his wrist in a bathtub when Amir comes home and finds him. After recovering, Sohrab stops speaking and Amir succeeds at bringing him to the US by petition. Now, when Amir gets back to Americans, he reunites with his wife, who is solemn about Sohrab's chosen muteness. One day, they bring Sohrab to a park where kites were being flown, and Amir asks Sohrab if he would like to play. So, receiving no response, Amir goes on with flying the kite, and Sohrab follows naturally. Now, the two are soon drawn into a game that Amir used to play as a child with Hassan. They bond over this game. Sohrab smiles, and after winning, Amir runs after the kite for Sohrab. So, actually, the friendship his father, that is Sohrab's father, shared is again started by Sohrab and Amir. So, this is a wonderful novel which is heart-throbbing, and also it throws glimpse into various incidents that is happening in Afghanistan, and also it's almost like a realistic portrayal of what's happening in Kabul. Now let's go through the characters in the novel. Now Ali, as I said, is Hassan's father. Ali is a Hazara whom Baba's father took in when his parents were killed, and he grew up along with Baba just as Hassan did alongside Amir. And Ali has a crippled leg and paralysis in his lower face muscle, and the neighborhood children ridicule him. And he's a devoted and loyal father to his son. Ali is killed by a landmine when Hassan is already grown. Then you have Amir, the story's narrator and protagonist. He's an Afghan man who had a privileged childhood in the Wazir Akbar Khan neighborhood of Kabul, and the defining event in his life is the betrayal of his closest friend Hassan. Amir lives in San Francisco from the age of 18. He returns to Afghanistan at the age of 38 and ends up adopting Hassan's orphan son Sohrab. Then you have another character, Asif, a sociopath who worships Hitler. And as a child, he is the neighborhood who bullies and who rapes Hassan. As an adult, he is the Taliban official who is delighted in killing people. Now he keeps Sohrab as a sex slave until Amir comes to rescue him. After he beats Amir nearly to death, Asif loses an eye to Sohrab's slingshot, and it is possible that Hosseini based the character of Asif on the reclusive one-eyed Taliban leader Mullah Omar. Then you have Baba, Amir's father. He is a wealthy and well respected man with a dark secret. He had an affair with Ali's wife, and Hassan is his illegitimate son. Baba wishes Amir were braver and stronger, and that he could openly express his love for Hassan. Baba dies of cancer in San Francisco shortly after Amir's wedding. Then you have Farid, the Afghan man who drives Amir from Peshawar to Kabul and ends up helping him throughout his journey. And he also saves Amir by taking him to a hospital in Pakistan when he was injured fighting against the Soviets, and he was also fiercely proud of his loyalty to Afghanistan. Then General Tahiri Soraya's father. He's a former general who preferred collecting welfare to lowering himself to a blue collar job. And he waits every day to be called back to Afghanistan. Then you have Hassan, Amir's most loyal and devoted servant, who is born with a cleft lip. He and Amir were nursed by the same woman, and they are half brothers. Here, Hassan is illiterate but smart and stands up for others. Also, the best kite runner in Kabul dies at the hands of the Taliban, defending Baba's house from takeover. Then Khanam Tahiri, Suraya's mother, she's a kind woman who likes to sing, although her husband does not let her, and she becomes a hypochondriac after suffering a stroke and loves Amir all the more for listening to her describe her ailment. Then you have Omar Faisal, a lawyer who counsels Amir that his best chance is to place Sohrab in an orphanage temporarily, and he was raised in America but speaks perfect Farsi. Then you have Rahim Khan, Baba's closest friend and Amir and Hassan's confidant. He is one of the few people who knew Hassan's real identity and about his rape. He encourages Amir to be a writer by giving him a notebook, and it is he who summons Amir back to Afghanistan to atone for his and Baba's sin. Then you have Raymond Andrews, the official at the American embassy, who urges Amir to give up trying to rescue Saurabh. Amir thinks he is cruel and does not understand wanting a child until the secretary tells him that Raymond Andrews' daughter committed suicide. Then you have uh, Sanobar Hassan's mother. She was Ali's notoriously beautiful first cousin and second wife who ran off with a troupe of dancers. And then you have Sophia Akrami, Amir's mother, who died in childbirth. She was the professor of literature at the university, and her books inspire Amir to become a writer. Then you have Sohrab, Hassan and Farzana's son. After his parents are murdered, he stays in an orphanage in Kartese. Then he is a sex slave to Asif until Amir rescues him, and he tries to commit suicide after Amir tells him he may have to stay in an orphanage again. Eventually, Amir and Suraya brings him to America and adopt him. Suraya is Amir's wife. She shamed her family as a young woman by running off with a man. She takes care of Baba when he's ill and eagerly accepts her into her family. Then you have Wahid, Farid's brother. When Amir stays at his house, Wahid is kind to him and um, does not judge him by being American. He calls Amir a true Afghan. Then let's see the main themes in this play. Kite is one of the important or the central themes in the novel, The Kite Runner. And everything is on a plot level. The Grand Kite Tournament of 1975 sets a circle of betrayal and redemption into motion around which the story revolves. And the activity of kite fighting is violent by nature, and based on that, so many incidents are happening in this novel. Then you have discrimination as another theme, the issue of ethnic discrimination in Afghanistan, with an example of relationship between Pashtuns and Hazara. Now Baba's father sets an example for him of being kind to Hazara people, even though they are historically demeaned and persecuted, and that is continued by Baba and later on by Amir. And in Taliban controlled Afghanistan, discrimination is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And on the one hand, the Taliban do not seem to care whom they are beating, torturing, or executing. And children like Sohrab and grandmothers like Sanobar are all susceptible to the Taliban's cruelty. So now, Hazara community, the relationship between Hazara and Pashtuns are showcased in this novel in a very clear way, and how they are treated by others, Talibans. That is also shown through the treatment of Asif. Uh, the treatment of Asif. Um, Actually, he treats Hassan and Sohrab brutally, and that is the best example to show the discrimination. Then you have sin and redemption. Redemption is so important because sin is so enduring. Amir opens the story by telling us not about how exactly he sinned, but about sin's endurance. Then he also Amir also finds once Amir also finds out about Baba's sin, and he feels as though his entire life has been a cycle of betrayal, and even before he betrayed Hassan. So, by having a taste of betrayal himself, does little towards redeeming Amir, and he also um, needs, Suraya needs Amir to forgive her before she can marry him because she had ran away with a dance troupe once. Okay, so uh, sin and redemption is also an important theme because Baba has betrayed Amir and Amir has betrayed Hassan, and Suraya also wants forgiveness from Amir for her previous incidents which happened in her life. Then literacy and the written word. In the novel, writing is both a dividing force and uniting one. Amir's wish to be a writer separated him from Baba, who wants him to be an athlete and equates his bookishness with weakness. And despite the connection between literacy and discrimination, the written word is largely a unifying force in the novel. Now, one thing that makes Amir admire Suraya even more is her story of how she taught an illiterate woman to read and write. That act of teaching unified Suraya and the woman. The telling of it brings her and Amir closer together. So, traditionally, the power of written word is located in its endurance beyond death. And this rings true in the novel when Amir reads Hassan's letter. Although he reads it, as he reads it, it does not yet know Hassan, he does not know that Hassan is dead. And um, again, Rahim Khan's letter is the final one in the novel, and it is also the one containing the message for about forgiveness. And Hosseini gives extra emphasis to writing's importance by putting this central message in written form. Then another important theme is family ties. Family is extremely important in the story, and it takes you know that it takes place in Afghanistan. It's a nation where culture and tradition are of monumental importance, especially to the older generation. Now we see this when Baba and Amir are in America, and even though they are in a different country, Amir is expected to observe cultural tradition in courting Suraya. Then, when Amir and Suraya are considering adopting a child, General Tahari explains that Afghans are not meant to disturb their family line with such a decision, and he tells them that Baba's reputation was a big consideration in regard to their marriage, and says, I quote, blood is a powerful thing, and when you adopt, you don't know whose blood you're bringing into your house, unquote. Now, when General Tahari does not know that the reason of why the family is so important to Afghans, Baba kept Hassan's identity secret to his grave. And to him, denying Hassan his identity was preferable to confusing the relationship between Ali and himself and that between Amir and Hassan. So, family is the reason why Amir fights to bring Sohrab home and ultimately the channel through which he redeems himself. Then, violence. Now, even though Hosseini has stated that he wanted to remind people of a peaceful Afghanistan, he also does the service of revealing the suffering nation has experienced in a quarter century of conflict. Violence pervades the novel, and not only is kite fighting violent because it's a kind of battle, the boys injure their hands when they participate. Then Afghans' memories of their homeland are tainted with suffering. The entire novel centers around a single act of violence, Hassan's rape, and the sin Amir commits by pretending that violence did not occur. Symbolically, Hassan's rape is echoed by Sohrab's rape decades later and by Afghans' continual rape by war and terrorism. So, Amir's life in America does involve suffering, especially regarding Baba's death. But Baba's death is peaceful. America is a haven from violence, and violence under the Taliban in Kabul is even more shocking and sobering. So Amir also gets a taste of violence when he and Baba are fleeing from Pakistan and Kamal's father commits suicide. Now, when he also learned that Amir also learned that violence is not the answer to Amir's problems, and he does understand just how deep its consequences run. So when young Sohrab tries to kill himself, Amir sees that his nearly fatal injuries were nothing compared to the pain Sohrab and other Afghans have suffered. And ultimately, he finds out that the only way to heal the violence done to Hassan and Sarah is to forgive himself. Then you have homeland and nationality as another important theme. Now, after Amir immigrated to the United States when he's still growing up, the question of his national identity is complex. Baba sees America as a refuge and becomes enthralled, as Amir says, with the idea of America, and he identifies with American optimism and freedom of choice, and even hangs a framed picture of Ronald Reagan on the wall of their apartment. And up until his death, Baba is a guest in America. Afghanistan is undeniably the place where he can be himself. And he also, now for young Amir, America is not only politically free, but more importantly, free of Hassan and memories of him. And he uses the image of a river to describe the exhilaration and cleansing effect that being in America has on him. He opens his arms wide to America, even though he maintains Afghanistan tradition regarding courtship and writes a novel about Afghanistan. Then Amir's coming to Afghanistan should be, all account, be a homecoming, but Amir can never truly revisit his homeland. It no longer exists in the way he remembers it, and also the Taliban have turned it from a culturally rich and bustling place into a ghost town of beggars among the rubble and hanging corpses. And Amir can no longer be an Afghan because being an Afghan has become synonymous with having survived terror, if no more, not much worse. Then, to make a place one's home, Hosseini seems to suggest one must be willing not merely to dwell on nostalgic feelings, but to put them into action, whether like Farid, by fighting in a trench, or like Amir, by trying to save someone from the homeland himself. So, with that, we come to the end of the main theme. So, in short, The Kite Runner, the novel, deals with the country of Afghanistan from the 1970s to the year 2001. Like all places, Afghanistan has a long and complicated history, and it came to international attention only after the coup of 1973. The nation is located in Central Asia, and it's made up of 34 provinces, and the country's capital is Kabul. And Afghanistan means land of Afghan. Afghan being a name the Pashtun majority used to describe themselves starting before the year 1000. And this place is bordered by Pakistan, Iran, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and for short distance, China. So that influence could be seen in this novel. And then this novel is so important that it gives a glimpse into the real condition in Afghanistan. Okay, and there is an important quote in this novel, and it is very important to note that I quote: "It hurts to say that, but better to get hurt by the truth that confronted with a lie." Unquote. And this is the quote from the novel. That is, it hurts to say that, but better to get hurt by the truth than confronted with a lie. Which it represents how Amir and others in the family are constantly lied to throughout the book. So that quote is very important when you look at the life of the characters in this novel. So, with that, we come to the end of the whole uh, paper, and with this, we wind up the session. Thank you so much, and all the best for your exam.